This is where Montana talks. Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
It's my microphone. There we go. Now my microphone's on. All right. I'm going to get to Liam McCollum here in just a second. But first, I want to play this clip. This is from Fox and Friends. Now, this had to be from, a couple years ago or so, because this is when this concept, I think, was first introduced. Some of you have heard of the Defend the Guard Act. It came up for conversation during the Montana legislative session 2 years ago. And, of course, this legislation has been reintroduced for this session as well. But, yeah, our friend Liam McCollum, first got a chance to have him on the show when we were broadcasting live from Missoula a few years ago. He was just a college student at the time, but had a great libertarian-oriented podcast and Montana guy as well. But Liam sent me this video clip of now Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth back when he was on Fox and Friends. And here's what Pete Hegseth said back then when it comes to the defend. Whoa, the defend. I turned my phone up a little too much there. This is what he had to say when this idea of a Defend the Guard Act first came up.
This caught my eye. It's a really interesting development. Right now, this is New Hampshire only. And New Hampshire is simply pointing out that it's supposed to be Congress that declares war. It has become an executive branch function. And as a result, unless the Congress declares war, New Hampshire doesn't have to send troops for foreign wars. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I spent most of my career as a National Guardsman, deployed multiple times with the National Guard to foreign wars. We got used to the idea that state National Guard are part of expeditionary forces, which is not traditionally the use of a National Guard. And so this is New Hampshire saying, we don't trust how the federal government's going to use our troops, so we're willing to commit them when the American people, through their elected branch in Congress, commits those troops to a foreign war. Then you can. I love this idea. I'm sure the National Guard Bureau is, oh, no. Okay. I love states exerting their influence through a system of federalism and the idea of protecting the prerogative of why are we sending some young guy from New Hampshire to the eastern province of Afghanistan when you have a northern border problem or floods that happen in New Hampshire and they're not there to be able to provide support for that.
Anyway, there you go. That was now Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. That was obviously from probably at least a couple years ago. But anyway, yeah, thanks to Liam McCollum for sharing that clip with me a while back. Let me get him queued up here on our Teams conversation, our little, Zoom-style platform. And I might have to change my audio settings at least once or twice there. Yeah, Liam, hey, thanks for joining us here on Montana Talks. I don't know if you heard, I just played the soundbite from Pete Hegseth that you shared with me, I don't know, a couple weeks ago or so. So, Liam, great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, and there I go. I don't know why. I just changed my settings and it came in garbled, but you should be good to go now. Tell us about the Defend the Guard Act that's been reintroduced in the Montana legislature. Is it the same legislation as the last session, or has it changed since that point?
So, yep, this bill is called the Defend the Guard Act, as you said. It's HB 404, and it has been introduced by Representative Lee Deming. The wording has changed a little bit to clarify that the only thing that this bill does is prevent the National Guard from being deployed to combat zones overseas. So it makes clear that all other federal functions and state functions of the National Guard are intact. The National Guard will be able to continue to engage in foreign training missions overseas, natural disaster recovery efforts, and things like that. But the real reason for this bill, the main thrust behind it is, as you know, the National Guard is sort of the backbone of the military currently, and it has been since 9/11. It was 45% of the entire fighting force during the global war on terror. It made up nearly 20% of all of the casualties. And most people, when they think of the National Guard, they think of it just as, citizen soldiers that meet once a month and they rarely deploy. But that's not true. You reported on the fact that the Montana National Guard were deployed to Syria a couple of years ago, where they saw combat with ISIS. And I had friends on that deployment that were staged in Kuwait, and units from that deployment did indeed go over to Syria, where they saw combat. And really, at the crux of this bill is constitutionalism. It's trying to rein in constitutional war powers. Representative Lee Deming is a former honor civics teacher, and he believes deeply, that war powers should remain with Congress. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, said that the executive branch was the branch with the most power interested in war and the most prone to it. And our founders were very wise in trying to divide war powers and vest them in Congress. But unfortunately, Congress has abdicated this duty and has basically given the executive branch power to send our National Guard and our military into over 150 nations across the globe. Most people don't know what countries we're in or why we're fighting them. And our troops, in the last few years have been operating in more than 65 countries. The National Guard has been engaged in about 7. And all of this has been done without a declaration of war. Congress hasn't declared war since World War II. And since 9/11, we have sort of entered a new era where the executive branch is very interested in adventurism and has used its authorization from 2001 after 9/11 as an excuse to go into many countries and target numerous groups. And this bill tries to crawl that back.
Yeah, it's hopefully with President Donald J. Trump being back in office, a lot of this forever war nonsense will start to come to a halt. But yeah, as you point out, I think critics on the left and the right and libertarians like yourself, I think have gotten to this consensus that we've got to stop these forever wars. And, Donald Trump was taking us down that path of stopping the forever wars his first term in office. But then, of course, 2020, Joe Biden ends up taking power in 2021. And, and through his weak foreign policy, boom, it looks like another forever war gets launched with Ukraine and Russia and draining our bank accounts back here in the United States and causing all sorts of destruction. But again, hopefully President Trump's working to bring that to an end right now as well. But it's a point of criticism, which is like, okay, they keep getting all of our troops into all of these wars, but yet why don't they man up and actually declare it an actual war instead of these open-ended, forever wars?
Yeah, and I think Ukraine is actually a perfect example of why a declaration of war is so important. At the beginning of the war, everyone was sort of full bore, let's go in and win this thing. But as we saw, since the entire people were not behind it through their Congress, it has waged on, and it has sort of become a meat grinder where now the American people are not fully committed. They were never really fully committed to send in troops. They were never fully committed to keep funding this conflict. And we see this with all of the conflicts. Afghanistan is a perfect example where we originally went in, we wanted to take out the Taliban, we wanted to go after al-Qaeda, but after 20 years, we simply replaced the Taliban with the Taliban again. And so it kind of proves why a declaration of war is so important. A declaration of war is the mechanism that signifies that the entire people are behind it. And with these wars, the people aren't. And I definitely do agree with President Donald Trump's foreign policy. In his inauguration speech, he said that we will measure our success not just by the wars we win, but by the wars that we end and the wars we never begin. And I'm very grateful that Pete Hegseth has endorsed this legislation. There's a lot of fear-mongering in the state that if we pass this bill, somehow that will mean that the federal government will be able to defund our National Guard. And I don't think that would be legal for them to do for many reasons. There's a lot of case law like South Dakota v. Dole or Perpich versus United States that I think prove that. But additionally, the Secretary of Defense supports this, and so does the current Director of National Intelligence. Thankfully, Tulsi Gabbard was just confirmed yesterday.
Didn't Senator Tim Sheehy endorse it? Didn't Senator Tim Sheehy endorse this? Or did he speak out on this during the campaign? I can't recall.
Yep. So I met with Senator Sheehy at the Trump rally in Bozeman, and I spoke with him about this bill. And 2 days later, on a campaign stop in Miles City, he met with Representative Deming and on video endorsed it and gave one of the best defenses of it. And I was very grateful for that.
Yeah, very interesting, because I did just put a quick little Grok search just to see what it would pull up for me on, the Montana version of the Defend the Guard Act, and then some of the discussions at the national level, and so I talked a little bit about some of the supporters and then some of the opponents as well. And I do remember the Montana Adjutant General of the Montana National Guard, Major General Ronick, came out and testified against the Defend the Guard Act during the last legislative session. And I haven't seen yet whether he's spoken out either for or against or is going to be neutral on it this time around. Liam McCullum, if you can, stand by. I got to take a quick break, but we'll come back to you right after this.
This is where Montana talks. Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
All right, we got just a quick few minutes left here. Liam McCullum, very smart guy, libertarian here in Montana. And one of the good libertarians, by the way, some of these libertarians, at least they call themselves libertarians, I think are just Democrat Party plants. They're open borders liberals, and they get involved as libertarians to try to undermine Republicans and to try to undermine the conservative libertarian movement. But Liam is a solid guy. He truly is passionate about these issues. Let me go back to Liam in a second. Let's sneak in a quick phone call, though. John in Great Falls, did you have a quick question or comment?
Yes, sir. I did have a comment. The reason that the National Guard is involved in the total force was because of what happened during Vietnam, when so many people joined the National Guard to avoid service in Vietnam. So after that, the DOD and the government got the Guard involved in any conflict. So
in a much bigger way,
about trying to get the National Guards to. Yes, sir. But and that just brought, listening to your discussion, that brought that to my memory that one of the things that happened during Vietnam is so many people avoided service. So
yeah, good point. Thanks for the call. Sorry we're short on time here, but I mean, they're so reliant on an all volunteer force now because of the negative repercussions from the draft, et cetera. Liam McCullum, we got just a couple of minutes left here before we wrap up the hour. I would encourage people, hey, they can follow you on X at Liam McCullum. And then I'll try to get something on our Montana Talks website here as well. What else do you want to share with folks across Montana?
Yeah, I would just say this bill does not prohibit the National Guard from going to war ever. It is not saying that this will just remain a state militia. I think that built into the Constitution is the fact that the National Guard is supposed to be a federal and state entity. It's very unique in that way, in that it has a federal mission and a state mission. The only thing this bill does is require Congress to do its job beforehand. So for the last caller, I agree. I think that is the reason that we started to use the National Guard again. But unfortunately, we've been using them improperly. We've been using them in wars that we aren't willing to end. And Afghanistan is a perfect example of that. And I would just say I think that this is very much in alignment with the America First foreign policy. I think a lot of people would rather have the National Guard here at home to, defend our border. Governor Abbott was going to war basically with Biden over the National Guard when he tried to use his National Guard to erect razor wire along the southern border. And I think that is a better function for the National Guard when we are currently being, there's an argument under the Constitution we are being invaded, and that is one of the roles of the constitutional militia is to protect against invasions. And so Donald Trump, he said on the campaign trail, he said our country is being destroyed by a radical political class that sends our guardsmen and women to defend the borders of distant foreign nations while they surrender our own borders to an invasion right here at home, the likes of which we've never seen before. When I'm back in the White House, we will expel the warmongers, the profiteers, and take over our government, and we will restore world peace, and it will be peace through strength.
And boy, is he doing it. He's doing it. He's fulfilling that promise every single day. We're seeing movement in that right direction. That is for sure. Liam McCollum, great to have you on this show in addition to your X account that I just shared. How else can folks follow you or listen in on some of your great insight and commentary?
Yeah, just follow me on X and make sure if you support this bill to contact your legislators and encourage them to support this. If you want to look into the bill more, go to defendtheguard.us. And again, it's HB 404.
All right, Liam McCollum, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us. And I'll have to see if the Adjutant General might want to join us to talk about it as well, because I also understand the concerns. I mean, relevant and ready. That's what they're all about. And they want to be relevant and they want to be ready, and so there's always concerns that it could undermine that. But overall, we've got to rein in these forever wars. So, Liam, I appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us.